Welcome to the Guyver Geek YouTube channel. I'm your host, Donavon Thompson, aka the Guyver Geek. And gals, we have a very special guest with us today, of course, the one and only Mr. Steve Wang. Steve?
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you. I hope we get a lot of good morsels of stuff from Guyver films. You know, I know it's been quite a long time since I've really talked about this movie. So it's going to be interesting to find out what I remember from it.
Yeah, I'm super excited. And of course, we've interviewed David and Bruno and Kathy from Guyver 2. And we've even interviewed Wyatt Weed recently and Evil Ted Smith. So I'm very excited to kind of get the ultimate brain on both these projects within the director. And if our listeners are more interested about the making of the films, of course, Don O'Brien had a great making of book. It came out, I think, roughly the end of 2023. So you can get this on Amazon and other places like that. But it's called Budget Biomorphs, the making of the Guyver films. There's a lot of great anecdotes there from you and from everyone I just mentioned. And if you're interested,
it's wonderful, wonderful book.
Yeah, it's a great compilation. And if you're a big Guyver fan, of course, check that out. But let's kind of dive into it, Steve. So first of all, just want to say again, thank you so much for being on here. I know we talked a minute bit before the show started. But for me, Guyver's been with me my whole life. And I grew up in a town in Batesville, Arkansas, population 10,000 people. And I was born in 92. Guyver 1 came out in 91. Guyver 2 came out in 94. And these movies have been with me my entire life. And it wasn't until I was probably early college, right out of high school, I started realizing there's other people out here who love these films, who love this property. And we just kind of got to get connected, you know? And so through this last year, you know, just trying to make compiling things and finding old trailers and then talking to you guys. It's been a real great journey. And again, just thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Well, I want to thank you too. I mean, I came across your channel. I'm not sure how I came across it, but I remember just seeing all these interviews and all the stuff you're doing. And I just want to tell you, I really, really appreciate everything you've done on your channel, you know, for Guyver in general, which is a phenomenal anime, in my opinion. And also, too, just for your support of all the films. I mean, we put our heart and soul into those movies, and whether, you know, they're any good to some people or not, I know for the Guyver fans, it means so much, and to see all the support over all these years has just been amazing, and it made it really worthwhile. So I want to thank you and thank all the Guyver fans all these years.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And fun little antidote. You've been always so gracious to the fans because I sent you a Facebook message probably, I don't know, 7-8 years now. And I was a broke college kid. And I said, hey, are you guys ever going to release something with the Guyver unit? And you said, hey, well, actually, with our Elite Collectibles, we're making a Guyver unit replica. And that was like my holy grail. And I was so poor at the time. I had it pre-ordered. And then the day before it was going to go live, I had to cancel the pre-order because I was a broke college student. I mean, literally living paycheck to paycheck. It was kind of my grail throughout the years. And finally, in my glass case over here now I have a Guyver unit. And I have the signature from you and everything. So anyway, it's just, you've always been so nice just to respond to fans, and it means a lot. And I know all the fans out there are going to love listening to hear you talk about filmmaking and, of course, Guyver. So let's kind of dive into it. You know, again, I tell everyone I'm a Guyver geek, but I'm a filmmaker first. I want to kind of talk to you about your journey into the filmmaking world. So what got you started into filmmaking? Like, what was the spark that kind of lit the fire?
It started in 1985. Yeah, early 1985. And it was literally about 6-7 months before I moved to LA to start my career as a makeup effects artist. And I had a friend that was, you know, majoring in film, that was making movies all the time. He always has these crazy ideas for movies. So he's always telling me, oh, I want to make this movie. I want to make that movie. You know, you can make those monsters for it and all, whatever. But it was always this talk, and it was always very exciting talk, but never really, you know, nothing ever really happened. And so I just got really curious, you know, like what is it about filmmaking that people love so much, but don't do, you know? It was more a question for myself. Like, I'm just so curious because I've helped a few friends during that time, you know, on their short Super 8 films. And, you know, like 7 a.m. going to the forest in the rain, holding reflectors was not that exciting, especially when someone who wasn't really into making films at the time.
Yeah.
So I did that for a while, helping friends out. And I just thought, like, there's got to be something that makes people want to make this. So then I came up with this idea with a friend, you know, like, let's make a short film called Kung Fu Rascals, you know. and I'm gonna direct it, and and gonna shoot it, and we're just gonna like dive into it and just see what happens. So I started doing this on the weekends, and over the course of 6 months, I mean, I finally got it. I understood. It was hard work. You have to do so much organization just to make a crappy backyard film with friends, cast of, like 20, 30 people, whatever. And just organizing it and getting food. And, it was nuts. But after 6 months of this, going through all that, I finally asked my friend, hey, so now that the film was shot, we had like 33 rolls of film. How do we edit this together? And all I got was like, oh my God, it's going to take months and months to edit. It's going to be crazy. There's so much footage. And me, I didn't know anything, right? So I was like, well, why is it going to take so many months to edit? There's only 33 rolls of film. And so I just thought, well, I'm not going to wait 2-3 months to edit this thing. I'm leaving to LA in a month, So I just asked. So I asked my friend. I said, "What is this? This is this is the film splicer. You put 2 pieces of film and you cut it here. You put the tape here. You tape it. Oh, is this what you do to edit together?" And it's like, yeah. I'm like, okay, cool. I started packing stuff up. He's like, "What are you doing?" I'm gonna go edit a movie. 4 days later, I came back and I had a 30-minute film edited.
Wow.
And
okay.
And that was it. That the cut that you see in the Kung Fu Rascals Blu-ray, the original 30-minute film. That was the cut. That was my 4-day edit job. First time, making a backyard movie with my friends.
That's crazy.
And then after I did that, and we spent one day doing sound live to VHS, which is hit record just the audio part. And my friends and I, we just made the sounds up as we went and did all that. So sometimes we hit, sometimes we missed. It didn't matter. It was a backyard movie. So that was a 1-day sound job, and that was done. We screened it for all our friends, and it was at the screening that I realized why people wanted to make movies, because all of a sudden you've created this thing from nothing, and it's entertaining. Even if it's only to your friends, you guys are doing all the silly things. You're telling kind of a story, and at the end I'm like, wow, this I can see being addicted to this. Like, you're wanting to make movies, and I did. I got addicted to it instantly. And at that point, I was like, I got to make more movies. So when I moved to LA, I met up with another friend named Jim Toller, who made these amazing Super 8 films. He had lighting, he had sets. He was in these Indiana Jones movies, and I swear to God, they were amazing. And they had like sync sound. He managed to sync sound to Super 8 film. And but I understand in the 80s you had nothing. We had VHS. There's no digital video. There's no editing software. There's like nothing. Everything was analog. So for this kid to do all this amazing stuff that was sync sound alone was mind blowing. And so I got together with him and my good friend Matt Rose, who passed away about 6 years ago. And we got together and we started to shoot this little short kind of a Japanese samurai inspired demon movie. And through the course of that, we started to understand about the concept of too many cooks in the kitchen and butting heads, creative ideas, right, and all that stuff. So we shot a bunch of stuff, but we never shot the whole movie. So fortunately, most of the stuff that we shot was the stuff that I wanted to shoot. So I managed to salvage some of that footage and put it into the new Kung Fu Rascals movie. Just a small amount of footage, because it's only like really one quick fight scene. I had some of the more cinematic stuff that was really cool. Unfortunately, I couldn't use because I couldn't fit it into the movie. So all the dark, underexposed stuff ended up in the movie, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, what's one thing you're really talking about there is I had this conversation with, typically the above the line people while we're making whatever film it is, a short film or indie film. Like, sometimes it's like, why are we doing this? Because it can be a very painful process sometimes.
Oh yeah.
I have like PTSD almost of like holding a giant like 8x8 flag and the wind's blowing like 60 miles per hour, and we're all standing on a C-stand, sandbags, and we're dying. It's like negative 10 degrees. But the next day we're like, we can't wait to come back. We can't wait to keep finding out and exploring with our friends. And you're right. Whenever you're screening these things in a film festival or other people, there's just something about it. It is truly magic, I think.
Yeah, and you can't feel the weather watching somebody's movie.
Nope, you cannot.
I mean, we have scenes in my film Drive. I remember we're shooting the scene where they're all dodging these rockets being shot at them at the motel. It looks like a warm summer day. It was like 39, 38 degrees that day. It was freezing cold.
Yeah.
And everybody was miserable, and we're shooting this giant rig with all the wires and all the huge explosions, and it was just like, no one would ever feel how cold it was. They think, oh, it's a nice warm summer day. So
100% movie
yeah,
magic.
yeah. So I learned over time, like, that the pain you feel, it doesn't matter because it will never translate to film. What's
Never.
important is what's in front of the camera.
I 100% agree. I do kind of want to roll the clock back a little bit. What movies inspired you? Like, I mean, I know you said that, you kind of would have figured out why is this movie thing working for people, but what did you watch growing up that you're like, man, like I love that, like Indiana Jones or Star Wars, or what was the thing for you growing up?
Well, I mean, I have to be honest in that I probably made my movies all for all the wrong reasons. Like if you like, I was a big martial arts fan when I was younger, and not so much now, but back then I was a huge martial arts fan. And so when I was making movies, I just wanted to shoot fight scenes.
Yeah.
And and whenever you meet somebody that wants to make martial arts movies, that's all they care about. Let's go out and shoot a fight scene. You go to a
Yeah.
new location. This place looks so amazing. Oh, let's shoot a fight scene here. It's always
Yeah.
about shooting the fight scene. So I just wanted to shoot a bunch of fight scenes. But then, if you want to tell a story, well, you got to have a story to go around these fight scenes. So I made movies for all the wrong reasons, at least when I was trying to make movies. And then I sort of started learning the importance of telling a story, especially a compelling story. And then when that started to kind of kick in more, then I started to focus more into that. So when I made Kung Fu Rascals, it was kind of like, it wasn't really just about the fight scenes. I was trying to tell a story, but that was supposed to be a 30-minute film when I first made that movie. And the short of it was that it was going to be financed by a Japanese company who was going to buy a 30-minute short from me. And so instead of waiting for the money to come, I just jumped ahead and like, okay, let's write the script with my friend. And we, did this whole thing. We're going to shoot this movie, and then started shooting. And then halfway through, the money fell through. And so I was like, oh, fuck, I'm screwed. I committed all this money into this. And I put already $20,000 of my own money into it. And so I asked my dad, hey, can I borrow 20 grand from you so I can finish my movie? And he was like, okay, fine. So then I borrowed money and I ended up just keep going. But while I was doing that, I knew that if I stopped the momentum of shooting, that I would lose my crew, because I had crazy guys like Wyatt Weed and Ted Smith and a ton of other friends that were helping out on the weekends. Nobody was getting paid on that. I mean, occasionally I would help them out and pay for some of their bills, or I'll do whatever. And then a couple of guys I ended up paying some money at the end when I sold the movie to. But it was just one of those things where we had this momentum going. And everybody was so into it, and I was in such a lucky situation where I just found this group of creative people that was as much into this film as I was. Something that I think I want to say it's rare that happens. And so I felt this commitment of, no matter what, I gotta finish this movie. I can't let these guys down. No matter what it takes, I gotta get it done. And part of that was like, can't stop. We were shooting only on the weekends. So during the weekdays, I would prep or do whatever I could, location scout, costumes, whatever. I know White would be building stuff during the week, Ted Smith. I mean, and they all had regular jobs. We all had regular jobs, and so just went ahead and did it. And unfortunately, what suffered was the story. There wasn't enough story for a 90-minute feature, but I knew I got to make a feature film. I want to sell this thing, so I'm not like in the hole.
Yeah. Was there a mandate from, you said you sold, I guess, the pre-rights to a Japanese company. Was there a mandate for how long it needed to be to sell in that market, or?
Yeah, during that time, I think the average video, the shortest a video movie could be, I believe, was like 80 minutes or something, like 75 to 80 minutes. And then I discovered something about myself making Kung Fu Rascals as well, is that all my movies were going to be long. Like, I don't consider the first Guyver movie like my movie. That was a collaborative effort. And there was producers involved. There was like all this. I was one of the voices in it, but not like the voice. So that was kind of cut down to a more reasonable running length. But Kung Fu Rascals was actually, the version that I screened was actually shorter than the original cut. The original cut was much longer, but I ended up with I think it was like 105 minutes, I want to say, for Kung Fu Rascal. I don't remember exactly. But then when I did Guyver 2, when I did Drive, I mean, my first cuts were like 2 hours and 40 minutes for each of those movies.
Wow. Oh, man, my brain immediately went, there's so much we haven't seen. That's what I just thought. Yeah.
And I had to cut so much out of the film, just and even then, I remember in Guyver 2, New Line threatened to sue me if I wouldn't cut it down to 90
Really?
minutes. Yeah, it
Wow.
was already 2 hours and 3 minutes, and they wanted 90 minutes. And at that point, I was pretty ballsy back then. I just told them, "Fuck you."
Yeah.
This is going straight to video. Who the fuck cares?
Right.
You put it on a tape, it just goes out. Who cares if it's 2 hours or 4 hours or whatever? You're
Yeah.
not booking theaters.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, I say I'm not going to butcher this movie. This. If I had my way, it'd be another 5-10 minutes longer.
Yeah.
So
And they backed off from that. Like they were just kind of like, okay, well, we'll just let him do it.
yeah, they backed off, but then they blacklisted me or whatever. And I didn't give a shit. Whatever,
Yeah.
but
Well, hey, I mean, you got to make the movie you wanted to make, and that's or at least the running length, and that's something a lot of filmmakers they really don't. I feel like I hear the repetitive story of like, well, you said the first film, it wasn't really yours, and it was the studio mandate, or all these kind of things, and
yeah,
that part of that's the game you play, and part of that is it's a vicious game, right?
it's heartbreaking game.
Yeah,
it's a very heartbreaking game.
very heartbreaking. But how did you go from making Kung Fu Rascals to then be working on special effects for movies
It
like
was
The
actually the
Predator?
opposite. It was I've always wanted to do makeup effects since I was a kid. Like,
Okay.
I moved here from Taiwan when I was 9 years old.
Okay.
And already back then, I was already really into Ultraman and Kamen Rider and Kikaida
Awesome.
and all these
Yeah.
Japanese superheroes. Like, that was my thing. And Kung Fu movies. I watched Kung Fu movies voraciously as a kid. So when I came here, I already had this thing that I was really into. And then so when I came here, I saw the movie, the Creature from the Black Lagoon. I saw Frankenstein, and I saw all these amazing horror films that were made here. And I instantly was like, I just, and I saw rubber masks for the first time. And that blew my mind. I couldn't wrap my head around that. Got the idea, like, wait, so you got this super realistic looking rubber thing you could put on your head, and then you can become something else. Like, it just blew my little mind. And I was like, I got to collect this. So I would, do all kinds of chores and mow the lawns and earn money. And then I held on a job since I was 12 years old. I started working a job when I was 12 years old. I've never stopped since then. I mean, it's nuts. I've had a job since I was 12. And I would earn money, save money, and I would go to costume shops and I would buy masks. And I collected about 30 of them till I was about 14. And at that point, I was like, okay, this is not enough. I need to know how they're made.
Right.
And luckily, I was kind of artistic as a kid. I did a lot of drawings. And so I started researching, like going to the library and looking up books on theatrical makeup and watching little snippets on TV. That's 2 a.m. Like, the making of The Exorcist or King Kong,
Yeah.
the Rick Baker King Kong. Like, oh, there are sculptures and there are molds and there are masks. Then I started to discover my friend Johnny Psycho. Like, he was like my childhood friend growing up. He was also in Kung Fu Rascals as Repo. He turned me on to all these magazines like Cinemagic, and did all these amazing articles on how to make masks and do makeups. So from there, I started to teach myself how to sculpt and paint and make molds. And
That's crazy.
with the goal of coming to LA eventually to work professionally, which I did.
Well, what do you do like whenever you see you're finally in LA? What's your portfolio? Like, do you have a briefcase of masks you made, or like what's that process? How did you get on set?
Well, I spent 5 years building my portfolio. From the time I started sculpting up to the point, I moved down to LA when I was 19.
Okay.
So from that time, from 14 to 19, I was making masks in my garage. I met Matt Rose when I was 17. And when I was 18, we got together and I spent a year with him in his backyard shop. We had a shop that we made masks for sale. And when we're not making the masks, which is most of the time, we're just sculpting our own projects, doing makeups, just did so much work in that 1 year with him. And then over that time, we built up a portfolio of all our work over the years. And then so by the time we're both 19, we moved to LA and was lucky enough to just get work right away because we had a substantial enough portfolio. And according to the people that met us, they were saying the general consensus was people were pretty blown away by our portfolio. Because again, back in those days when you were 19, you're already over the hill. Like, what? You're too old. You're like a Padawan Jedi. You got to start at 14, 15,
Yeah.
whatever. So everybody then was relatively young. All my contemporaries were around my age and maybe like up to 5 years older, maybe. And then you have the generation before us. But, it was like, that scene in Close Encounters of the Third Kind where, when the guy's cutting the mashed potato and he's like, this means something. Yeah. I feel like once we got to Hollywood, there's this congregation of people, like-minded people from all over the country that had this obsession with doing makeup and monsters. And somehow they all found their way here because there was no internet. It's getting information who does the stuff was like virtually impossible. But somehow we figured it out. Somehow they figured it out. Everybody figured it out and found their way there and got in and got work. So that's kind of how it was.
That's super cool. And LA always has, to me at least, still has this mystique of artists from all over the world, the East Coast, whatever, all congregating to a place to do something that is considered very hard to do, or very hard to break into, at least. And that's super cool to hear that you guys all found each other. Can you tell me what your first big film was? I know, like, on your IMDb, at least, it says Harry and the Hendersons. We got Predator. What was the first film you're like on stage, like, okay, I'm official big movie right now?
I would say the first film that was on a real Hollywood movie was Invaders from Mars.
Okay.
That was my first job in LA. I worked on a couple of smaller films in the Bay Area before I moved. But those movies, I don't think they ever got finished. But there were movies and we built stuff for it. But this Invaders from Mars was the first time I worked for Stan Winston Studios.
Okay.
And there's these big drones in it. I mean, it was a full-on creature effects movie. And that was cool. I mean, I came on more or less just as an assistant. I was like running polyfoam, cleaning molds, patching stuff. And then when it came to painting stuff, they gave me something to paint, and I painted it. And Stan Winston saw it. He was like, "Oh, you're pretty good. Maybe paint this and paint that," and ended up doing a lot of painting on it. And then they sent me to a set with the rest of the crew, and I was there for about a month and a half every day, working these long hours, getting people in and out of the costumes. And then once they're done for the day, we have to stay late to repair it. Then we go home, sleep 4 hours, get up in our car, drive an hour to set again, and just repeat. Yeah, for like a month and a half. It was rough.
It sounds like it.
But I learned so much, doing that. It was amazing.
How long were you working with Stan Winston Studios?
In totality, I would say about 10 months over 2 years.
Okay.
Because I did that project. It was only like a 3-month project. And after that, I heard Rick Baker was hiring for Harry the Henderson. Yeah. So I went to interview, like everybody on the Stan Winston crew went to go interview while we're still on set, just to try to get the next gig. So we all went in an interview. Most of us got work there. Matt Rose and myself got jobs sculpting. And the funny story about that was, before we came to LA, there was a contest in Fangoria called Design the Ghoul Brothers. And the Ghoul Brothers was these two guys, supposedly ghouls, that composed kind of a folk singing record album, And so I don't remember the music or anything, but it was an opportunity for Matt Rose and I to design. So I came up with the idea like, hey, let's do a Gene Siskel, Roger Ebert ghoul. So I'll do the fat one, you do the skinny one. And so we just sculpted this thing, just, I think figured we're never going to win. We're terrible, whatever. We sent it in. And then I think 3 months later, we found out like we won first place.
That's crazy.
But what the crazy thing was, the reward was just the album, which was kind of nothing, right? But the real reward was when we came to LA and we found out everybody knew us as the Ghoul Brothers.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Already had a nickname.
Everybody has seen it. I heard of Steve Johnson when he saw, he had just done Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, I think just before Ghostbusters came out, he was really pissed that somebody did a fat looking thing that felt like Slimer, like kind of stole his thunder a little bit and whatever. But ultimately, when Rick Baker hired us, he was like, "Oh, you're the Ghoul Brothers." So it was kind of like, wow, Rick Baker knew who we were, and Rick Baker was like my idol. Yeah,
very cool.
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about your directing style here too. So, we talked about Kung Fu Rascals. Obviously, you directed the Guyver 2, Drive. Can we talk about what's your approach when you're going to direct a film? I know you said earlier that you kind of just want to get to the action scenes, but do you storyboard? Do you do a shot list? Well, what's your typical approach whenever you're directing?
I do a bunch of different ways. I do a lot of storyboarding because a lot of times I want to wrap my head around kind of like, I'm one of these guys that I have a hard time deciding how I want to shoot something.
Okay.
A lot of the times, and I'm not talking about this inspiration of, I just this idea of I'm shooting a shot like this, whatever. It's not so much that. It's more like when I'm making the movie, the bulk of the movie, right? How do I want to present this? And in my mind, I think there's 100 different ways I can shoot this. So trying to find what I feel would be the best way to show something is what really tortures me the most, because I'll draw this and I'll draw that and I'll draw this and I'll think, okay, if I do a move like this, and how do I bring? And ultimately, what I end up always settling for which is kind of the style that I sort of learned watching Steven Spielberg movies, is that the way he shoots a lot of his movies, not all of it, but a lot of his movies I really enjoy are the ones that are the way he stages things in his shot is always a series of reveals. One shot brings you into this and brings you into that, and this happens, and that shows that, and that whatever. And so the complexity of his blocking and the camera, but how precise it is to tell a story within each shot. That's what I gravitated the most to when I watch his movies. And so a lot of times now when I plan sequences, when I tell a story, I always do it in that series. And I feel like that kind of also keeps your audience interested because they're always wondering what's going to happen next, even if it's, subconscious, because your shots are just are doing that. So I'll storyboard stuff like that, like sequences, I'll storyboard. Real basic stuff a lot of times, like I'm very organic in how I work as well. I really do appreciate that when you're working with an actor will bring a lot to the table. And you try to hire actors that's going to bring something to the table. So I don't want to limit them either, because I've done the other way, and I always felt like that ends up hurting the film more. And you get into conflicts with actors, with disagreements. Those kind of things happened in some of my films that I regret. At the end. But I feel like I needed to try these things. I need to learn for myself. So I would try these things. And ultimately, what worked the best for me is basically sometimes I'll go on set and I wouldn't have an idea how I'm going to do something. And I'll talk to the actors. We'll discuss the scene and go, "This is what I'm trying to do with this. What do you think about this?" And we kind of work it out, and the blocking will just happen pretty naturally. And then and one thing I did in Kung Fu Rascals was that I knew ahead of time that this was going to happen a lot in my career. Sometimes I'll walk on set and something will completely change. Like, oh fuck, this rain, you just got rained out. You can't shoot here today. You have to go here right now and shoot the scene that you completely didn't prep for. So you have to go walk on set, look at the pages, and go, all right, let's do this. So knowing that would happen in the future, when I did Kung Fu Rascals, I would do this on purpose. I'll write the scenes, whatever, the night before. I'll get on set with no plan. I would purposely not plan anything. Get on set and figure it out on set and keep it going and shoot it. And some of the best things I've done were actually happened like that, and so like one of the things I did in Drive that I really loved, and it was a horrible, horrible day because I changed the dialogue out in Brittany Murphy last minute because I wrote a bunch of gibberish about, the specs of a car, a hot rod. Sure. I told my friend who made the hot rod, I said, dude, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Can you take what I just wrote and just write something that actually is real? And he said, sure. He wrote it, and I gave it to Brittany and said, hey, Brittany, forget that. Say this. And she's like, oh my God, I just memorized all this last night. This is like Star Trek speak. And I was like, I'm so sorry. But, I didn't mean to do this to you, but you have to say this or else you're not going to sound believable. So we did the first take, and she nailed it. And every single take we did after that, she couldn't get it. And it was not her fault. It was my fault because it was Star Trek talk, and it was a horrible day. And I was like, oh man, I'm totally fucking this day up. This is going to be a horrible scene. Somehow, when the scene was done, the first take that she did was perfect. And so we got to use that and cut it up, whatever. And when it was all put together, it's one of my favorite scenes in the movie.
Yeah.
Just the charm.
It's always crazy how that works out sometimes.
Yeah, the timing, the chemistry, the two characters, like everything just worked so well. So you never know, and so I always keep my mind open of anything can happen. Don't let how the day went be the judge of. Don't let the cold weather ruin your day because it'll look like a nice warm day on film. It's like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're understanding right, and that's one thing that Steven Spielberg is in my top 5 favorite directors of all time, and it's for that very reason. The way he stages things and how he delivers information to the audience in a very digestible way through the edit and through the pacing and the blocking of the scene. He truly is a master of that. And when it comes, here's an interesting thing too. So let's just kind of jump ahead a little bit because this has to do with blocking and kind of staging. So you're coming in with you typically maybe some days not a stricter plan than others, but so for like Guyver 2 example, when you guys are building these intricate caves, you're building those sets. So like you are an interesting director Where like Spielberg, he's not making the costumes, he's not building the sets, he's not kind of doing that kind of stuff, but you kind of have your hands in all these different pots. So how like so on that kind of footing with the cave system, particularly in Guyver 2, you had to build it in a certain way where you're literally putting yourself in a corner to shoot it a certain way, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm glad you noticed that because these are all the things that we just all take for granted as an audience. But this comes with pre-production. This comes with planning. When I shoot my movies, I always do the scheduling myself. I do all the strips myself, because I feel like as a director, as a filmmaker, and this isn't apparent because I've worked with a lot of directors over the years. I just came back from Netflix in New Mexico. I was there working on this new show there. We built a bunch of stuff for, and so I got to work with the director there and watch how she worked. It's always interesting for me to watch how other directors work. And the one thing that I'm very, very aware of when I do my films is the logistics. When that cave, I know that okay, it's a set. We build it. We build the alien stuff. We build the stuff that covers it. We have to look like we're excavating it in stages. So you can't just shoot the excavation in one stage, stop everything, tear it all down, redress it while everybody's sitting there waiting. So we had to shoot that sequence over a period of many days. Yeah, but then we can't just stop because your budget is so low, you can't waste time or money. So how I was scheduled would be like, okay, from today we're going to spend 3 hours and we're going to shoot this sequence here, leading up to here, and then we're going to move to this set. We're going to shoot this while our department spend the next 2 days taking us to the next stage, and we'll come back and we'll shoot this again. But while that's happening, we're always shooting somewhere else, somewhere logistically that makes sense. So I plan these things into the schedule ahead of time. In fact, here's a funny story. I was supposed to at one point direct the Steven Seagal movie that Scott Phillips and I wrote called. It was named after a '50s film, Blood on the Moon. It was called Blood on the Moon. It was a pretty good story. I was really looking forward to making this movie, and we got about 2 weeks from starting pre-production before the whole thing fell apart. And it was halfway funded. It was a $25 million film. It was a chance for me to do like a real movie finally, and I had worked with Steven Seagal for a whole year writing this thing. And we're getting so close to making it, and then the whole thing fell apart, unfortunately. But the one thing is the executive producer on the film, he always schedules the film, or he has the first AD do it. And then I asked him, I said, look, there's a lot of logistics in this movie. There's a lot of, yachts on the water, battles on the ships, and it was crazy. It was a crazy action movie. I said, do you mind if I schedule it? I'll do my first pass on it. Let me schedule it because of all the logistics. He's like, sure. So I sat there and I scheduled this. It was like a 55-day shooting schedule. So I scheduled the entire thing.
Pretty heavy.
And I sent it to him. And he called me back and he's like, this is the most well thought out schedule I've ever seen. Like you took into account everything from props, from making of this, from setting up the stages and the this and the that, and he was 100% behind me. He said, I will never question you on set because you know what's going on.
Wow.
And I go, yeah, that's part of my job is to be prepared, but also being a builder in the makeup effects industry and just kind of naturally being a builder, I kind of have a grasp on the logistics of a lot of things and be able to have some foresight to think ahead. A lot of times we do these big projects, I have to build the entire thing in my head ahead of time so that I can ask all the hard questions of things that are going to come up. You're going to kind of, it can get complicated. So luckily, I kind of was fortunate enough to have a bit of that kind of brain for stuff like that.
Well, one thing I'd say, I've taught some at my previous university, and obviously I went to the program with them. You don't have to, no one has to go to, Steven Spielberg did go to film school, right? So you don't have to do that sort of thing. But the thing that I really tried to focus on was I want to learn how to grip and gaff and hold the boom and do lighting and cinematography. And I've done lots of AD work and those kind of things because I wanted the ability to be able to talk to every department whenever I do direct. And that way, there's clear communication, there's no hangups. And the thing I kind of kept seeing over and over with other students throughout the program is like, I want to be a director or a cinematographer, and that's all they would do. And there is merit in that, but then they would get time to direct their thesis or whatever it was, and they had no like visual or filmmaking language at all to other departments. And so it's super important. I tell everyone who wants to do this kind of thing, you've got to really know all the departments if you want to be really, really good at it. At least get a head start.
Yeah, and depending on what you're making, it's like I said, I've worked with a lot of different directors, and they have all different styles. And I work with directors that are shooting effects movies, and they have no idea how to make an effects movie. Their approach to a film is very much like a drama. They literally show up that morning. They have some storyboards. They have some idea of the blocking, what they want to do. They get there with the actors. They talk to the scene. They work it out. They just do whatever. It's all the stuff that a lot of directors do. They work it out, and then if they figure it out right there on set, and then the coverage is however they feel like they want to cover it based on either their storyboards or whatever, and they get everything, and then they play everything from like 10 different angles, and they got the scene. Fine, but I don't find that to be very interesting,
Well,
and then
there's no intent behind it. That's the problem.
right, exactly, and so that's why somebody like a Spielberg is such an amazing filmmaker, because he can shoot an entire scene with like montage cutting, never have to repeat a shot over again, and he can move the camera, he can block everything, and get the entire scene, either in a one shot or in a multiple number of shots that cut together seamlessly and that has a flow to it, whatever. To me, that's where the art of filmmaking really becomes from technical to artistic, and that's what all the fun is for me. Like sometimes I feel guilty if I think of a scene, like, when I was doing Kamen Rider, I was able to experiment a lot because it was TV, it was kids. And sometimes I'll be like, do I want to shoot this as a oneer? I could totally do it as a oneer. It'll be fine. But I'm like, no, because then if I get done ahead of time, people could be pissed at me. I'll just take my time.
Yeah.
I'll change it up a little bit, whatever. But there are times where I go on set and it's like, oh, how many shots is the scene? It's like one shot. Only one shot? Well, we're scheduled here for like 2 hours. I know, but I can't see any reason why this scene needs to be more than one shot. Let me just block it out and I'll show you. And we do it, camera move, boom, we got it, and it works, and it's fine, and we move on.
That's one thing that I've heard Samuel L. Jackson talk about in his interviews and other whatever. And he talks about how they do a scene, they shoot it, and it might be a wide or a master, whatever it is. And then the director wants to move the camera, he wants to punch in, get a different reaction. And he says that typically, this is from his perspective, if he sees them getting a lot of coverage, he starts to trust them less to the production because they're not trusting themselves, because they're, like you said, they're getting 10 different angles, and so they're just shooting for coverage for studio executives, those kind of things. But the flip side, someone like a Stanley Kubrick, who just shoots, like he used to just shoot the bare minimum. Like he would not shoot anything extra, so it would have to purposely cut a specific way in the edit, or it would completely fall apart, right? And so that's kind of what we're talking about, the intent here. But I brought up the cave stuff because, and I'm not just saying this, but when I go back and I've seen the movies ad nauseum at this point, Guyver 1, Guyver 2, and
sure you watched it more times than I have.
I've seen them a lot, and
I edited the movie, uncredited, but I edited that movie.
Yeah. Well, whenever I did that little 4K thing, I went, I cut every single shot. Like I literally spliced every shot, because I also did for my own self, like a widescreen kind of version, just for funsies, because I thought just to see what it looked like, even though it chops off some of the corners. But so I got pretty familiar with the movie, and so I got to see a lot of the editing and the way you guys were kind of blocking things, and I started to really notice. That's why I brought up the cave stuff. I think the cave stuff is some of the best directing into the movie, just the way things are blocked, the way things are revealed, and just kind of how the camera moves from actor to the actor. And I was like, man, there's some really good filmmaking going on here, and I think I really do think that. And if people, obviously they didn't have a huge release, and as people find them, they start to love them. And I think if people give them a chance, they'd really find a lot of cool things to like about the movies. So yeah, I kind of dive into the Guyver here, and kind of talk about how you got to the production of the first film. Famously, we know that, at least the fans know, that you and Screaming Mad George co-directed the film. And we kind of just want to give a little recap here. How did you get to the set and meet Brian Usna and start working on the Guyver?
Well, I mean, the Guyver, Screaming Mad George and I met in 1986 at a company called Boss Films. And he was just finishing up on Poltergeist 2 and Big Trouble in Little China. And I was brought in to work on a film called Hunter, which eventually became Predator. And so George was he was not the very first guy I met. The very first guy I met who toured me around ended up becoming this big effects guy with his own studio. named Todd Masters, great guy. But then once he got me all set up, I'm sitting there, I'm starting to grab some clay to start my first sculpture. And this crazy Japanese guy shows up with this blonde hair, and he's like, "Hey, what's your name?" I'm just like, "Steve." He's like, "What's yours?" "I'm Screaming Mad George." And I was like, "Screaming Mad?" He goes, "Yeah, why are you so mad?" "I'm not mad. I just like to scream a lot." It was just, we just this banter, but basically he says, "Hey, do you know Kung Fu?" Right away. He's just like, "Do you know martial arts?" I go, "Yeah, I know some martial arts." He goes, "Oh, what do you do?" And then we just got talking and we just became friends like instantly. I just knew like that from day one, like this guy is going to be my friend for life,
That's really
and
cool.
so we just became great friends, and we ended up building like a little core group of friends. And then cut to a few years later, we worked together on a bunch of different stuff. He was approached to do the effects for the Guyver. It was going to be a Japanese movie. And he told his agent, he says, "Well, why don't you bring it into America and we'll do the effects, but let me direct it." And so his agent's like, "That's a great idea." So he asked Toei, and they said, "Yeah, great." And they found investors for it. So now George got this movie to direct. But he wasn't comfortable doing the action stuff. And he needed somebody else to help do the creatures with him. And I had done a lot of monster suits already by that point. So he asked me, he said, "Hey, you want to come in and direct second unit for me?" And at that point, I was still shooting Kung Fu Rascals. I was getting close to finishing shooting it, but I wasn't done yet. And I said, "Well, I've been working hard at my own film. I'm trying to be a director, I'm sorry, I'm going to take that back. I hate the word director. It's just, I don't ever consider myself a director. I consider myself a filmmaker because for me, it's the whole process. It's about the whole process. I do all of it. I do the post, I do the editing, I do the directing, I do the everything, right? So for me, it's a complete experience. And so I said, well, I said I would rather be involved in a bigger capacity. And so George said, he was very gracious. He said, "Well, how about if you co-direct it with me?" And I said, I'll do that. I would love that because a 35 millimeter film. I'm shooting a Super 8 movie for the first time. So George invited me to be a co-director, and then we got together. We built the creatures together, and we got on set, and we got along famously. I mean, George is still one of my closest friends, after all these years. And so we ironically we only shot one scene together, which was day one. It was the karate dojo scene. Okay. That's the only scene we shot together. And then after that, because of the demands of the production, we ended up having to split the first and second unit. So whenever George is doing first unit, I'll be shooting second unit. And whenever I'm doing first unit, George is doing the second unit. So we just kind of trade off throughout the entire shoot that way. And every so often we'll go on each other's set. "Hey, what are you doing? Oh, I'm doing this." Or sometimes we'll shoot like an effect sequence together. Like when Sean first got hit with the control metal and he starts to like transform for the first time, we shot that together. So that experience with George was seamless. I mean, it was just like we worked so well together. So that was fun.
It's not super uncommon to have obviously a second unit director doing the action sequences and the first unit doing more of the scenes and the drama kind of stuff. But how do you said you guys worked well together, but how do you have that continuity in terms of shot composition or just kind of making sure that you're not having two separate films Frankenstein together? Like how was the...
Oh, we didn't. We did. We actually, we made two separate films. That's exactly what happened. I mean, you can see the total shift in the movie. Another thing that happened in the movie that was really unfortunate was that before we started shooting, we got a mandate from the money people that, Ninja Turtles was the new hot thing. So they want to turn it into a comedy. And both George and I were like, "What? Comedy? Guyver's not a comedy." And it was like, you got to do a comedy. And at that point, we were just like, all right, you're either all in or you're all out. So I was like, okay, we'll make a comedy. And we just kind of made it as funny as we could at the time. A lot of ad lib, a lot of, but honestly, I was not loving that experience at all. I really kind of hated it, to be honest with you. And I just felt like we were just not making something that I was into personally. And, and I love comedy. Don't get me wrong. I had just shot a movie, Kung Fu movie. But it wasn't the Guyver. Like the Guyver should not have been a comedy. And so we put it together. I had a lot of hard experiences on the Guyver. I'll be honest, and I'm not gonna point fingers. I'm not gonna say whatever. I'm just basically. It was just every day was just like after we wrap, me and the AD would sit there for an hour and get yelled at, and about how we're fucking this up and we're fucking that up. And this is, going over schedule, over budget. I mean, it was just the typical, typical situation on a production. And then we got into the editing of it. And at one point, George and I were still shooting pickups, and they had hired an editor to come in to edit the warehouse sequence. And it was a 10-minute sequence, and it was just the most horrible editing I've ever seen. And then I got yells after that, like, you don't know what you're doing, you don't know what you're shooting. None of the stuff cuts together. And I was like, no, this stuff cuts together. I'm not an editor, but I know it cuts together. And ultimately I got to the point where I basically just said, fine, I'm going to cut it together. And I was told, you can't cut it together because you're not an editor. Here's this film, chem 8-plate sync sound thing you know nothing about. And I just said, leave the editing assistant here. Show me how to work this machine. I'm gonna spend here. I'll be here all weekend. I'll cut this together. And so I basically, pissed a lot of people off. I sat there for an hour with the editing assistant, and I just said, how do you sync this up? How do you put the film up? How do I find footage from this scene, from that scene? An hour, I wrote all these notes, and I said, thank you, have a good weekend. And I threw them out, and I locked the door. And I was in there the entire weekend cutting film. At one point, I had about 30, 40 strips of film around my neck, and I'm just like trying to find shots. And I'm like, sync sound and sound going out of sync. And 3 a.m, grabbing 1,000 reel of film, opening it, picking it up, and then the core falls down. It rolls down the hall. That happened 3 times, I mean, it was a nightmare.
It sounds like it. So I think sometimes, I'm very spoiled. I'm editing on DaVinci or Premiere or whatever, and you're like, God, sometimes it just doesn't work. But I have all the sympathy and empathy in the world for pre-2000, where everyone was shooting on film, and the nightmare that it comes with editing. I can't even comprehend it, honestly. I would love to try it, but
I would tell you, I think you would appreciate it, and you would love it.
I know. I mean, I've been like in Arkansas, where I'm from, Batesville. That's the second oldest theater in Arkansas, and the Melba Theater. And I used to go up into the upstairs. I used to work at a theater also, but we would do some baby splicing stuff just for reels and stuff. And I think that stuff's fascinating and very cool. But I know it's super hard though.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard. It's also satisfying. It's only I can say it. It's like to feel the film in your hand. Yeah, feel the film, and then the sound of the tap tap cut, and the tape, the tap tap, and then playing it, and then watching it sync up, and there's something really magical about that process. And I've only done it once on film, a 35 mm film like that. But I'll tell you, man, I love every minute of it. I think the difference between shooting, like editing analog versus editing digital, it takes the same amount of time to cut the movie. The big difference is that when you're doing it on 35, right, you still need that. You can only do one cut at a time. So you gotta think a little bit more. You gotta be more careful. Think about digital is that you can do 8, 10, 20 cuts of the same film much faster. But what you don't get the luxury of still is that gestation period of being able to actually absorb it, watch what you've done, and really feel whether or not it works or not. So it still overall takes the same amount of time. You're trying things less on the film. You're trying things more on the digital. But ultimately, it's still that same amount of time for you to finally get it all in your head and absorb it and feel it.
Yeah.
So
well, on that note, there's a book called In the Blink of an Eye by Walter Murch. And for our listeners, our watchers, I forget sometimes we're doing a podcast. For our listeners and watchers, I'll put a link in the description below if people are interested in editing. It's a great book for what you're talking about.
I have that book.
It's a fantastic book. It's
Walter
amazing.
Murch, I actually know his daughter.
Really? Wow.
Yeah.
Very cool. Very, very cool. Yeah, no, that's an amazing book. And it talks about like basically the 6 principles of the hierarchy of editing. And it's fantastic for our listeners who want to learn more about that kind of stuff. And very, very cool. So what was the outcome the following Monday after you've been in the editing room all weekend? So
Monday morning, that people came in. And not a good morning, not a whatever. I've been there since Friday afternoon, right? I had it all synced up. I had music cue to Total Recall, the Jerry Goldsmith soundtrack.
Yeah.
And then so they came in. They says, "Let's see it." Was the only thing I was said to me. Let's see it. I had it queued up. He brought in a new editor, and this guy ended up edit the rest of the film, and he was actually a very good editor. So it was really fun working with him. And so I ran the whole 10-minute sequence. and thinking like, yeah, I'm gonna get fired, and or they're gonna fucking get yelled at again, or whatever. And to my surprise, and to the credit of the people who were, yelling at me all the time, they didn't yell at me.
It's a
They actually
positive.
said, "All right, this looks pretty good. Maybe you can look at these other scenes." And then I ended up editing in the evenings, and I edited like 33 minutes of actual film myself on
Wow.
the final cut of the film, on film.
Do you feel like I mean, that movie particularly, but it's this constant battle for approval in terms of just trying to convince them that you're the right person to do this.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because film costs so much money, and it's understandable when there's a lot of adverse reactions to you because you're doing so much on film, especially if you're the director to get a lot of pushback, and it's understandable only because it costs so much money. And if you fuck it up, you're fucking everybody up. You're fucking up the investors. You're fucking up the producers. You're fucking up, letting everybody down. So I can see that aspect of it, and unfortunately, that equates to something that doesn't really equate to what happens naturally in nature. When you're an artist, right, and you do your first drawing, it's gonna suck, and you're gonna do 100 drawings. It's gonna be pretty good. And you're gonna do 10,000 drawings, and you're gonna become a master. Right, this progression of education, learning, and discovery. With film, your first time, you better be amazing, or else you're not going to get a second chance. So that's the problem that a lot of first-time filmmakers deal with. That's why when you see a first-time filmmaker come out with the film, and it's terrible, you don't see them direct anymore. But some of them are so persistent that they'll somehow find a way to do a much smaller film somewhere. That's their vision, and it might come out and become a breakthrough film, and then they're back on the map again. But again, it's based on how persistent you are, how creative you are. Because I think every first-time director have to eat shit, like hardcore. I took so much shit, dude. I can't even tell you. You gotta have a thick skin if you want to work in Hollywood. Because some of the most meanest people you could run into, and I'm not talking about the Guyver. I'm talking about in my whole career in this film business, in general. You meet a lot of really shitty people.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell people that. I mean, typically, the two big things I tell my, friends or colleagues, whatever, is like, A, don't be late, and two, don't be an asshole. But unfortunately, if you're either really talented or highly connected, you can be an asshole and kind of still work your way up the chain of command sometimes. And it can be rough for sure.
Yeah, and there are, and to be fair, there are a lot of producers, a lot of like other above and below the line people that are great and that are supportive of filmmakers. I've also had the opportunity to work with people like that on some of my other films, and when they're supportive, like I'm the kind of filmmaker that I thrive when people support me. Like I don't want to spend. I've literally turned down directing jobs because after I met the producer that I was going to work with and spend like 8 hours with that person, I turned the job down.
It's like being married or being in a relationship with someone for like 2 years. You're like, do you want to do that every night?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
yeah,
I just said to them, like, I thank you for the offer. I can't take this job because I cannot imagine spending the next 8 months of my life arguing with this guy.
Yeah,
I just can't.
Do you feel like there's a shift from 1990 when you're doing the Guyver to today in terms of just the environment of the industry, in terms of how people treat each other, or just, I mean, there's got to be some type of shift happening here.
I can't say that I'm an expert of that, only because I think to be able to say some of that, you have to kind of be in on all these different levels of filmmaking. The above the line is hard to say for me because there's so many different producers and whatever. Some are amazing, some are assholes. I mean, who knows, right?
Yeah.
So I speak mostly from my experience below the line, and it's been my experience mostly below the lines that people are cool. People are really nice. Like even this Netflix show that I just got off of, I was on set, and man, everybody across the board was so nice, from the showrunners, the producers, to the writers, the AD, the crew, everyone. I was having a conversation with the AD on set, and I was just like, I'm not used to an AD that doesn't yell at people. And she's like, I cannot do that. There's no way, man. They'll hang me. And I'm just like, I was like, everybody here is so fucking nice, and you guys get the job done. It's amazing.
Wow,
I love that vibe.
It's very refreshing and nice to hear. Now let's kind of talk about Guyver 2 real quick. So I know that the first film, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe had a $3 million budget. You were promised 1.5 for Guyver 2, and in the 11th hour was slashed to about 800,000. You kind of what made you kind of want to go, okay, I want a second chance at this, or I want to do this solo, and kind of bring more of what Steve Wang is to this project.
Well, so the solo part was the easy part because George didn't want anything to do with it.
Okay.
Because they offered it to George first, and I learned about it through George. George says, "Hey, they just offered me this. I don't want to do it. It's not my thing. If you want to do it, you can go." I was like, "Okay, I'll go talk to them." So it was thanks to George that kind of let me know about that. But I always felt like I let the fans down on the first one because not that it wasn't an entertaining movie. I think for kids it's a fun movie, but if you're a fan of the Guyver, I think it's a big letdown because it wasn't a Guyver movie. It was a comedy with monsters with a guy that looks like the Guyver,
right?
In it, doing Guyver things, sort of.
Well, I didn't even know that there was a cartoon, obviously, till way later, or even a manga way later, or what a manga was. For me, the movies were this is Guyver sort of thing. So, but you're right. Obviously, Guyver 2 falls more in line with the original IP for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, two things really motivated me. The first thing was I knew I could make a better movie, and I wanted to prove that to myself that I could make a better movie. And the second thing was I needed to apologize to the fans and I need to make something for them. That was really like a really big thing for me. Like I really have to do this no matter what. I got to figure it out how to do it. And so, I was 27 at the time and it was like, I don't know what like my daughter's 27 now, and when she was going through a bunch of old magazines with me in it, and stuff. I've had so many articles published of my effects work or film work, whatever. And she was going through it and she goes, "You did this when you were what? 4 years younger than me? You did this when you were," and it's not something I think about because back then we're 27. I thought, oh my God, I'm old. I got to get my shit together.
That's how I feel all the time. Yeah. I'm always behind. Yeah.
Right, but now with I think the attitudes have shifted so much with like Gen Z now. I remember at a time when they were saying, "Oh, the 30s is the new 20s," and I thought, okay, what is it now? The 60s is the new 20s? Like I don't get where the current social brain is at that point. But obviously, I think it's people are maybe their mentalities they don't feel as much pressure to achieve as much at a younger age.
Oh man, I do. So if it makes you feel any better, I feel it every day. My writing partner, I'm like, dude, we gotta keep writing every day. And he's like, we've got time, man. I'm like, we don't have time. We literally don't have any more time, So
no. But you have the right attitude because if you want to get anything done, man, you can run out of time so fast. Oof. And you can blink and 30 years will go by and you're sitting here talking to somebody about film you made 3 years ago.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah,
that's you're how fast time goes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So ultimately, I just knew unfortunately I wasn't smart enough to figure out that I wasn't a very good writer, a very good filmmaker, like not as good as I want to be. And so I brought Nathan Long in to come and help, and Nathan just, he did a tremendous job. Like he's like a guy that I still work with a lot, whenever I do a project. Or he came in, story editor and Kamen writer, was one of the lead writers of that. Yeah. Nathan and I get along so well. Like we think so much alike. So we did the best we could on that story. A lot of times I would lose Nathan on it. He would be like, wait. Why is he doing this if this is that? And like, well, that's because of this and this. Wait. But how does that? And he gets confused because, Guyver is kind of a deep concept if you kind of go, really think about it. Yeah. Especially for the time that it came out. And so, we did the best we could. And I feel like the biggest failing in the movie for me is a lot of the choices that I made. I think I didn't make the best choices that I should have, but I didn't know any better. You know what I mean? You got what the best I could do at the time, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I mean, every director, I feel this way too, that, you're going to see every absolute flaw. You're going to remember, oh, we should have done this, or there's a piece of the costume is coming off here, or whatever it is. You're going to see every mistake if you're especially the one that's steering the wheel on that ship.
Yeah. And that's not to say there aren't a lot of things in the film that I'm very proud of.
It's awesome. It's an awesome movie.
Yeah, and just I felt like we just got a great cast. We just got like everything just came together for a film that should not have, for the money especially. Like it just somehow, again, I was lucky to be in the right place at the right time, meeting all the right people and putting together a team that was so dedicated in wanting to make the best thing that we could do at the time. And that's one thing that is never lost on me, how lucky I was to have all that support just from everyone across the board.
Well, even just talking about the story, I mean, obviously the first film is kind of more, I would say, standard superhero fare where someone is call to action, they get some type of a suit or a power or something, and they're kind of dealing with that, right? The second one really dives into Sean's character, just in terms of this guy is tormented. And I mean, especially in 1994, how many movies, superhero movies or whatever, were dealing with someone who was kind of dealing with heavy themes like that, someone who was killing people and the trauma of that. And then, I talked, even on the flip side, I talked to Kathy last year this time, and I told her, I said, the character of Corey is very progressive for today's standards. And she's the smartest person in the room. She's putting herself in danger when she has absolutely no powers compared to all these other fantastical people. And there's a lot of things you guys were doing that I think that were really ahead of its time, just on the story level.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, I mean, I did put my heart and soul into that story. Nathan and I, we spent a lot of time writing that thing. And and the way that story came up was very organic too, because I have a very non-linear way of writing stories. I would come up with shots, I would come up with ideas, scenes, and then I would just have this book of nothing but ideas and shots and scenes and all this stuff and themes and concepts and all this stuff. And somehow I go, there's a movie here. Yeah. And I would kind of put it all together, and whatever fit, or whatever doesn't fit, just kind of goes somewhere else, maybe a future project or whatever. And based on kind of the whole concept of how that all kind of comes together, then we formulate a story to make it work around that. That's kind of how we did Guyver too. It started, I remember having a notebook of like, oh, then there's a shot of something like this, or there's this and that, and then it kind of like, I give it room to breathe, because I know that through the course of this creative process, we're going to come up with things. Things are not going to make sense, and we're going to have to remove and think, because other things will be born from the things that made no sense, And so that process to me is very fascinating, and I was really kind of get really deep into that kind of, as a writer.
I think writing it's one of those things that, I wish I did it more, and every time I do it, I'm like, this is where it's at. You're really fit. You have no boundaries, for one. And then two, this is filmmaking in general. The best thing about filmmaking, I think is why I'm so attracted to it, is it's all problem solving. And writing a script is like as the start of that problem solving is you're putting characters in a room. What are they doing? How does this tie to here, there? And again, I think you guys did a great job. And I have tons of praise for what you guys did. But I kind of do want to talk to you also about Koichi Sakamoto and kind of leveling up your guys' fight scenes from the first film to the second film. How did you get into contact with him? And I mean, some of this, again, I've seen lots of, you mentioned Ultraman. Ultraman, I'm a huge Gridman fan, of course, Kamen Rider, things like that, obviously because of Guyver. And, Guyver first, then going back and finding all these other tokusatsu stuff later because you want more things like that. How did you guys feel so ahead of your time in terms of the shot composition, the wire work, especially in guys in costumes? Tell me the process of getting Koichi on board.
Well, actually, he found me.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, we had put a drama log and all in the Hollywood Reporter. You put in new productions in development, whatever. So we put it in there. I get this call from this guy. He's like, "Hey, I'm a stunt guy, and I really love all the tokusatsu stuff and all whatever like you, and I want to come work on your movie." And I'm like, "Well, come over." So he came over with a couple of his friends, and we talked about stuff, and he showed me his reel, and I was really impressed with it. The stuff he was doing was great, but it wasn't Guyver 2 level stuff yet. But he had all these ideas and wire work and rigging and all this stuff, and we just got along great. And Koichi, I think he was like 4 years younger than me. I was 27 at the time. I think he was only 23. And he's like, "Yeah, I have 2 other guys from Japan, my team, Alpha Stunts, and we do this stuff, and I want to work on your film." And we just got along, and we just spoke the same language. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna hire you guys. You guys can come in and we're gonna fucking make these things badass, because I can't do it on my own. I don't have that kind of skill. I love kung fu movies. I did martial arts myself, but to choreograph the stuff, to rig the stuff, this is not my strength. My strength comes into shooting it, editing it. My strength comes into coming up with the concepts of what we can do. Even watching choreography and be able to watch it, pace it, and edit it in my brain and go, okay, let's cut this out, let's do this, and be able to see that, envision that stuff ahead of time, that kind of stuff. So, which worked out really well with Koichi because that's how he worked. And so these kids came in, and we did all this crazy shit, and I think we cut our teeth through that because at that point I wasn't like super savvy with how to shoot this stuff. Koichi had shot a bunch of stuff too, so he had his ideas on how to shoot it, but he never infringed upon me. He never actually told me how to shoot anything. He just he'll show me the stuff, and I'll be like, okay, yeah, I'm gonna shoot it like this. Let's do it like this. And what I didn't realize was that while I was making Guyver 2, I was somehow developing a sensibility and a style of directing, of camera work. It was like the birth of that methodology and that vibe. Because by the time I got to drive, I never even have to think about it anymore. We can just choreograph it, and I just know how to shoot it and how to choose the best movements and and everything, like all the fights you saw in Drive was all organic. It was like, I didn't storyboard any of that shit. That was all just like we choreographed it, we do whatever. A lot of it was on the spot, and I already knew where the emphasis is going to be, where the drama is going to come in, how we're going to play this for comedy. So we should play this a little longer. It should be more of a pause here. Like I just knew at that point, like I just knew it. And Guyver 2 was sort of the birthplace of kind of my brain waking up to that world, to the technical world, how to shoot that stuff, how to put it together.
Me and my buddy Matt, we watched Drive for the first time. I was earlier last year, I believe, on the Blu-ray, and we'd never seen it before, obviously. And obviously we were getting the Guyver Geek stuff, and I was like, hey, we got to check out Drive. It's on like a 4K version now on Amazon, so we bought it and watched it, and we were blown away by it. We were like, how does this thing not have a bigger following? Like what you're talking about, the action sequences in that thing, some of the stuff you guys do. We were just like cheering almost. We were like, these guys know what they're doing. And like, I don't know. I just, I really wish to see direct more today and kind of, and go back to that.
Yeah, it's funny because when we were shooting Drive, I would always like to set with practicals so that I don't have to do too much lighting.
Sure.
Because I knew I have to shoot around the clock. And that film, literally, I did 5 weeks of 22-hour days. 1 hour to eat, 1 hour to go home, shower, come back, and continue working.
That's crazy.
I said 1 hour a day for 5 weeks shooting that movie because I worked first and second unit. And so the one thing was that, on my main unit, I had my main DP, who was Mike Wojciechowski, who shot Guyver 2. And second unit, I would have rotating DP. Sometimes I don't even know who's coming in to shoot. So I would just know, like, okay, everything's already pre-lit. We just move a 4-bank Kino flow anywhere to get our key light, and that's it. That's how we shot everything. And so one of the DP, Richard Claybaugh, who went on and actually direct one of those Python versus Boa movies, and I think he's teaching now in North Carolina. A really nice guy. He ended up becoming the main second unit DP for a while. And I remember one day where Koichi and I were discussing a shot, like, oh, we're shooting this and that, and then we're like, oh, wait, we can't do that because we have to do it insert here or whatever. And the guy was watching us, and he's like, you're editing this movie as you're shooting it. And we looked at him like, well, how else would you do it? Like, it's just like we literally have this, as we're making it up, as we're choreographing it, we're already shooting it in our brain, and we're already editing it in our brain. So we know exactly what pieces we have to pick up, what movement we have to do to get us into the next thing. It's like very organic. And so that's, I think that's how a lot of the Hong Kong action directors work. They already know this stuff. So, you can watch a choreography and you can already know how you need to shoot it. But more importantly, knowing where to build a drama, knowing where to tell the story, knowing where to put the quirky moments. That's
what I was going to say, is that to me, the big thing that I feel like we've really lost in the last 15, 20 years, and of course you see some outliers like The Raid or even maybe John Wick here and there, whatever, is the action has to reinforce the story. Like it has to, you have to reveal something about your characters through the action.
Yeah.
And like we were talking about the pacing, the timing, kind of getting the fun, like you said, the quirkiness of it. Like that's an art unto itself. And I really feel like, again, there's outliers that are kind of creeping back in, I feel like sometimes, but it's an art we've really lost. And I'm really hoping that we get it back in some way.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to make another film. I can't explain why I've not been able to direct a film after all these years. I know I did Kamen Rider. This was like 16 years ago. I was a showrunner on that with my brother, and I spent 3 years making that show. We did 40 episodes, and that was intense. That was like, 3 days per episode, sometimes two. One day I did 4 day episode.
On that's Kamen Rider Dragon Knight, right? So are you guys doing the Power Ranger method where you guys have some pre-shot things and you're filling in gaps? Okay.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
we had some of that, but ultimately, at the end of the day, I think I counted the footage, and we shot over twice the amount of footage of action than we actually used from Japan's side.
Okay, wow.
Because because it was approached like, oh, you don't have to shoot the action because we'll just have all the stuff. But then Nathan Long did an amazing job of basically watching 50 episodes of stuff, going through, cataloging every single scene, what footage is in it, that's usable, making a list of it, and then based on the story that we came up with, how to incorporate these footage, this person versus that person. I mean, I can't even wrap my head around what he did and how he did it, but he fucking did it, and it was amazing.
Now that's problem solving right there. That's truly problem solving.
Yeah. And then we had the easy job, like, okay, well, we don't have this scene here. Okay, we'll just shoot this scene.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how did that feel? I mean, you said that you grew up watching Kamen Rider Ultraman these days, and now you're getting to work on it. I mean, that feels like a pretty surreal moment.
Oh, it's a dream come true. I love Kamen Rider as a kid, and I actually met the creator of Kamen Rider, Shotaro Ishinomori, when I was 21. First time in Japan. I have a picture of it. I posted on my Instagram. I was wearing a Batman shirt. First time I met him, my friend arranged a meeting with him. I just met him as a fan, and then he had they just released this film, like a short effects movie that was playing at a local amusement park that he had done with this guy from ILM. And he just met me. He's like, I like you, kid. You look like you can be a Kamen Rider. And so he's just like, I'm going to get a limousine and drive you to there. You can go watch that film. So I had a limo pick me up. I go there. I watch this thing, and then they drove me back. And I'm like some kid that just met him. And so I'll never forget that. It's just how gracious, how kind he was. And I didn't know this back then, but 20 years later, exactly 20 years later, I got the opportunity to do Dragon Knight. And I'm just like, I'm going to make something that he's proud, because, I know he wasn't very proud of the incarnation before that Saban had done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just too childish, and I was like, I want to capture the mood, capture the essence of what he was doing with the original shows. And so that's what I did.
Very, very cool. Very cool. I'm a big hot toy collector, and they just dropped today the Kamen Rider 1 and 2 hot toys. Mm-hmm. So those are very cool for collectors if they want to check those out.
I just watched the first episode of Kamen Rider like 2 days ago.
Yeah.
On Amazon.
Cool. Yeah, I love it. I mean, it's all great stuff. Obviously, Guyver, Kamen Rider, they're all very, very mesh very well together. Mm-hmm. I want to talk, obviously I could talk to you forever, Steve. And again, I appreciate you taking the time. I think I told you earlier in the interview or beforehand, yesterday was the 1 year anniversary from the 30th anniversary screening that you guys did at the Frida Cinema in LA last year. And I was contacted like a week or two prior, and I was really knee deep in the Guyver Geek stuff at the time. I already had Jack Armstrong on, I had Bruno Patrick on, and then they contacted me for the print and those kind of things. So I didn't get to go out there and be with you guys, but I did watch the Q&A live, like 2 a.m. I stayed up to watch you guys talk about it afterwards. And, 30 years later, from what I understand, you guys were kind of just doing like a screening. You didn't really expect people to show up, or a whole lot of people, but you packed the house, right? From what I understand. Yeah.
I was shocked. I went there with my wife, and I was just kind of like, it took us 2.5 hours to get there from LA because of the traffic on Friday night. Yeah. And we finally got there, and the whole time I'm saying to her, God, man, I hope it's not going to be we get there and like 4 people in the theater. It's going to be so like embarrassing, And And we got there, and the first thing we saw was like, is that a line to the theater? That was a long ass line. I was like, okay, maybe this is not going to be so bad. But by the time she and I got into the theater was practically packed, completely full, and I was just like, wow, this is
Very
great.
cool.
And then I stayed the entire time until they closed, just to talk to every single person that wanted to talk to me. And I found out some people came from out of state just for the screening that night. I mean, it was incredible. And so the least I could do was to stay and talk to them, and tell them stories about all those things that they may not know about that could be fun, and
Yeah.
So yeah, it was wonderful. Just wonderful.
Well, that's where
great. Yeah.
Well, that's where Corey Auer and Eric Yang met, and Corey is the director of Guyver Midnight, and Eric wrote it, and then they contacted me, and there's more to talk about that later as it comes out. But it kind of reminds me of the story too of whenever you guys finish Guyver 2. Again, I there's so much we could talk about. The list is long here, but maybe another interview some other time. But whenever you guys got Guyver 2 finally compiled, I know Les Claypool was doing the audio as well as the score, and you guys were at a screening, and the film, you guys only had half a film, and but people stayed 2-3 hours later for you guys to finish it, to come back and watch it. That's pretty special. That kind of tells me something about the film, at least. Like, what was how are you dealing with that? I would have been freaking out probably in the moment of that.
It was incredible. I left to the convention with only half the movie, and Les was still working on it. And poor Les, he hadn't slept in days, and he was still composing the music, and all this stuff. And then finally, and this was even the finished film. This was like, not the final mix. He was just mixing it there just to get it done. And so I went there and I introduced the film and I showed it, and then it ran out. And I said, all right, so got a little problem here. I thought the second half would be here by now, but obviously it's not. And I said, I would totally understand if you guys got to go, but we are working on it. And if you guys, want to stay, we'll stay and, and tell you. And then I think like 80% of the people, maybe more, stayed. Like nobody moved. And I was just shocked. And I was sitting there for it was like 3 hours. And people were just talking, shooting the shit. It was kind of a fun atmosphere. And I remember talking to, I think Kenny Adomi. And I look at him like, can you believe this? Like, people are actually staying for this, This is, it's amazing. Finally, the film showed up, and we played it, and thank God it didn't disappoint, because people were cheering by the end of the film. I mean, it was great.
that final fight scene alone I watch it all the time just for fun. I mean, it's truly something special, especially if you're a Guyver fan.
One of the things I try to do is, with the Guyver was like, when I was writing the story with Nathan, I was like, I have to put in trailer shots, like money shots. So I came up with a bunch of stuff like, what's the trailer? What's the money shot here? Okay, him jumping off the cliff. Like, I wanted to do that shot, in one shot. I didn't know how we were going to do it, but I just know we had to do that. And then I wanted, when he pops out of the water, that whole superhero pose.
Oh, yeah.
Cutting the guy's head off. Like there was a bunch of stuff in the film. Like, I wanted to see like him running, and then one shot, the thing blast out of his back as he's running. Like, there's a bunch of stuff like that. I was like, I just knew I had to somehow figure out how to do that. And so I was very lucky. And I know that the transformation shot out on the mountain, that always gets a huge cheer from everybody.
Oh, it's super cool. And I know David has kind of talked about this story, but apparently you got him really close to the edge of the mountain there, right? Yeah.
He's a liar. He's such a liar.
That's what he says. He said you got pretty close. Yeah.
He was like maybe 2 feet. I mean, yeah. When you're looking down a really tall hill, 2 feet feels much closer than it really was.
Yeah.
But I remember yelling at him like, get closer. And he's like, no.
Yeah. Well, you can see it in his eyes a little bit. He's pretty determined that shot, but at the split second before it cuts, you can kind of see the switch a little bit there. But talk a little bit about, let's kind of dive into that just for a second, just because again, this movie has impacted me so much, and I've stole from it, copied it. And as a kid, you're making your own stories and all these kind of things. Let's talk about that jump sequence, because I know you guys later composited that, like I think on the back of a lot or something, right? It gets a green screen, correct?
Yeah, I'll explain to you how we did that shot.
Yeah, please.
It was like super crazy, like how we did the shot in the first Guyver movie, but in a completely different way. The way that thing was composed was the very first shot when he jumps off the hill. What Guyver doing this is actually David Hayter on green screen that we just shot in the alley. He was just holding his pose, and we animated that. the hill that you see him jumping off of and the camera's coming down, that hill is a miniature hill that we built that we put in the
Wow.
back of an alley. Yeah.
Very
And then
cool.
we had the camera on the track. I remember because I shot that shot with Ted Ray, the VFX supervisor. So I did the camera move and he pulled the trailer back. And the key with that was at one point we had to do a blur hard enough that we get a blur because the blur was going to be the transition. And then from there, we were on location and I had two guys in Guyver suit, one guy on a ladder on top of a plank there that as he's jumping, I'm pulling the camera down and he lands in the shot. And then as he runs off, I tilt down to the ground and you see two little marks like burn marks where he landed with smoke. So that was all done right as he landed, they did that and moved out. Then as he ran out, the camera did a quick wipe. And then when the wipe happens, that cuts to a second shot that continues the wipe. And already it's a second Guyver who is way further down. And I had a whole track of air with smoke on it. And the air just blew us. It just went, created a smoke stream. And he's already really far down running away. So it looks like in one shot, as he took off, he was way further than he should be with a stream of smoke.
That final whip pan, is there a stitch in there to another shot, or is it you just had two different Guyvers, disappearing and reappearing?
Yeah, we had two different. Yeah, it was weird because I think there was a cut there because I remember the camera we shot with was an old school Mitchell camera.
Okay.
A big square box, weighed about 100 pounds, and I had to do a handheld, and I could not do the whip without falling on my ass. Was that
Gotcha.
that heavy?
Okay.
So I was wearing a body harness. I think there's a picture of me with the body harness, and two guys were holding me, keeping me from falling over as I was doing that shot. So I had to do the whip pan.
Okay.
I think when I was trying to do the whip pan into the next shot, and I couldn't without falling over. So maybe there wasn't a cut. I'm not sure.
Yeah,
It's been 30 years.
obviously, I don't know. I was just trying to think, looking at it in my brain, thinking about it. I was always kind of wondering how you guys did that, if there was two Guyvers going on, if there was the stitch in there.
Yeah, I
somewhere.
mean, there was definitely two guys in Guyver suits that day. So I don't remember if I did the whip pan in one shot or I ended up doing a cut because I remember the camera being so heavy that if I was down like this holding it, I couldn't hold it without falling over. It was that heavy. It was like a bag of plaster. It was that heavy.
Yeah, that's crazy.
But that's how.
We're very
And then when
spoiled.
he came down, right, it was the green screen, and at some point we CG animated all the cores coming out and coming down, and as he landed down that way, that was the guy in the full suit.
Yeah, I mean, again,
Well, it was a combination
1994.
of so many elements. Yeah.
You guys are doing so many cool things, and it's again, there's just on the coolness factor. I think it's a big part why I like the movie, of course. And as a kid growing up, just it oozes cool. There's just a lot of cool things happening, especially for a teenage boy. You're like, damn, that's cool, you know. So
Yeah, it's funny thing. It's funny thing because you mentioned about the screening a year ago. I hadn't seen Guyver 2 in years, and then so sitting there watching it, I was kind of like, oh, I hope this holds up. Because I know there's some wonky things in the movie, and I know that it's kind of, I don't know. I was kind of nervous watching it with the whole audience because not only did I know that none of the people there, aside from the cast, has seen it on the big screen when we did our screening 30 years ago.
right,
I know no one else in there had ever seen this on the big screen, so it was kind of like, it was kind of a new experience for them. And I have to say, even after I was done, I asked my wife, I said, "What do you think of it?" She's like, "Oh, it's a pretty exciting movie," and I felt it too. I felt like, wow, I made this movie because I wanted to watch this movie. And so despite things that I personally had problems with here and there as a filmmaker, I felt overall it entertained, and had good highs and lows, and it got pretty intense at times. And
yeah.
and I thought, it was better than I remembered.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
Because
again, just, doing the YouTube channel and putting up clips or then interviews like this, people are constantly flooding the comments or on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, whatever, and they're talking about watching this movie with their dad or finding it in the video store, just like I did. And it's really been this really weird, surreal thing, just finding out how many people like me grew up, small town, and they've discovered this movie on the shelf and how it's connected them either with family members or friends or to other Guyver enthusiasts throughout the years. And again, it's really weird to me, just again talking to David and you and Jack Armstrong and all these other people and getting to say thank you for all the work you guys did, and then also get to celebrate with all the Guyver geeks, I guess, out there. So yeah.
Well, thank you for everything, and all the support over the years. Yeah, I think if anybody's able to watch it projected on a big screen, that's the way to do it, because I never seen it on a screen that big since the first day that we screened it, and I'll tell you, it's a completely different experience than watching it even on a big TV at home. And having it really loud and stuff, and just getting sucked into it. It was just, I forgot like even my movies can have a cinematic impact. You're so used to
for
watching
sure.
it on a little
Yeah, I
screen.
mean,
So, it was fun.
again, I've been doing film stuff since 2010 now, and a large part of that is both those movies for sure. I'd get in trouble in those same comment sections if I didn't ask about Guyver 3, if there was ever talk about it, why there wasn't a sequel, or if it's something you would consider doing today. So can you kind of give me a little bit about Guyver 3 and
Sure.
was there ever conversations about it?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story because it spans a few decades. Back in the late 90s, I was approached about doing a Guyver 3 from one of the distributors, foreign distributors. And they said, we have a line into Canada. They're going to fund it. I knew I wasn't going to have anything to do with it because I pissed them off. But they said that we can get you like $1.5 million. And I thought, wow, that's such a hard number, $1.5 million to do a film like this. But you have to shoot it in Canada. But here's the caveat: if you write it, you can't direct it. If you direct it, you can't produce it.
Interesting.
And I'm just like, this is not the kind of film you can just assign people to. It's not that kind of film. And ultimately, I just had to pass on it because Canada had all these rules back then about how American, U.S. Canada co-production could work. And so that structure just didn't work for me. I was like, I don't know how to make this movie that way. I can't just give you a script and go, good luck with it, or have somebody else give me a script and I direct it. It's not my movie then, it's. So that ended up not happening. And then I think as recent as 4 years ago, I went to Japan and I met with Yoshiki Takaya. I met with Max Factory. I met with Kadokawa. We had a meeting about I wanted to get the rights to do the film again. And they were all for it. And Yoshiki Takaya gave me his blessing, like, yeah, I want you to make another movie. But I said, okay, well, Kadokawa was like, well, there's some convolution with the rights. We don't know who owns the rights to it. And I said, well, no one owns the rights to it. I said, whoever made the deal with the original, who I knew who they were. They were trying to track these people down. And we have actually tracked them down now. They said exactly what I told Kadokawa like 4 or 5 years ago. They don't know what kind of deal they made. They're saying, well, they could have owned the rights to the Guyver, all the movie rights. I said, nobody makes deals like that. You don't make your first deal with somebody who's just going to fund the movie and give them the rights of your film in all perpetuity.
Yeah, in perpetuity. Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, and also, even if you made a contract, usually after 25 years, it's null and void. It doesn't pass the 25-year mark. I say all the contracts with New Line is 25 years, and that's Guyver's already 30 years and plus. So I said whatever contract was made with them is gone, but New Line was only a distributor, so they have nothing to say about the making of the film. And then they brought up, what about Brian Usna, the first producer? And I said, Brian produced the first movie, much like how I produced the second movie. If I don't have the rights to do a part 3, neither does he, because whatever rights he has as a producer, he had to get it from the guy who got the rights from Japan, and who has finally come out and says, I don't know what the deal was. I certainly don't own it. He has no paper to show for it. So I feel like all the rights have been cleared, but there is a pushback, a resistance from Kadokawa to actually want to make this movie. And I don't know why. The only thing they said to me was that, because I proved to them, I sent them all the stuff, and I said, here's what's going on, here's what happened here, here's whatever, here's some documents I found, here's all this stuff. And they still wouldn't push. And at that point, I had my friend who I was just on the phone with before talking to you on the Japan side. He knows all the guys from Kadokawa like this. They've known him for 27 years, direct line. And he says it's going to be difficult. And when he says it's going to be difficult, it's going to be difficult.
Yeah.
And so the only solution that I have gotten from them was that if it's a Marvel studio wanting to make a movie like this and they want to dump $100-200 million into it, we'll make it work. Because at that point, if somebody sues, they'll just buy them off or whatever. But they don't want to take a chance that somebody else could sue. And I'm like, who's going to sue? The original company that produced the film says they're not going to sue. They don't even have the rights. the guys who got acquired the rights from Takaya says we don't have the rights. I don't have the rights. I know Yuzuna doesn't have the rights. So who has the rights? No one has the rights. The creator has the rights. But there's this but no one wants to pull the trigger. So after years and years of this, I just kind of say, I'm done with this. I want to do a one final one for the fans, or I want to reboot it for like Netflix. So I'm doing like an 8-episode thing, like a newly reimagined version of the Guyver, which I think could be really cool. I came up with some really cool ideas that I think the fans will be blown away. It's those money shots.
Hey,
these ones will blow the other ones out of the water.
Yeah.
But I can't, I just stopped thinking about it because that's I don't think it's going to happen.
I would love either or. Either we get Guyver 3 in some form, or if, like you're talking about, a reboot or something. All thing I ask, I'll bring you coffee. I'll be a coffee boy. Let me come on set and bring you coffee. I'll happily be involved that way.
I'm sure if you have skills, we can use it. You don't.
I can make a mean cup of coffee, Steve.
Yeah, unless your skills like your coffee is so it's like crack cocaine or something.
We'll figure it out. But I have to kind of ask this too, just because since you brought it up, fans would absolutely kill me if I didn't. One of the big things about being a Guyver fan is that it's a little heartbreaking sometimes. Like you're talking about, we haven't got a new movie in a long time because of the rights, whatever. And on the manga side, we haven't got a new chapter in I think probably 10 plus years now, or 15 years. Have you heard anything as to the continuation of that? I see you talked to Yoshiki 4 years ago now.
I have not heard anything about that. I will say I just found out today, and I don't want to spread rumors or anything like that because
absolutely.
I was just told this, but I heard that his health is not great today. So, so he's speaking through a representative right now. Whereas I met him in person when I was there, and he seemed fine. But this was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I just heard today that his health isn't great. I don't know what that means. Take it with a grain of salt.
Sure.
But he works. I think he does another comic book as a ghostwriter, or under alias or some or pen name or whatever you want to call it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been yeah. There's Guyver forums that's been active for 15 plus years now, and there's all kinds of things people talk about on there, and I know that it's a big deal for the community and trying to figure out what's going on. And I think they just want some type of closure of some sort. And
it kind of blew my mind too, because I found out that he works full time as a dentist.
Yes, we did know that, yeah. And so the last rumor we heard about 6-7 years ago, I want to say now, and again, we don't know if it's true, was that
I don't know if it's true or not.
Yeah, we had an assistant who passed away, and he kind of decided to kind of go back to being a full-time dentist. But again, we don't, as fans, we don't know. We have no one to confirm that for us. But you brought his name up, so I thought I'd had to ask. And of course, we got a new Max Factory figure from them last year, a really big 1/6 version. And so there's Max Factory is still doing stuff and making.
Yeah,
cool
he's doing it. He's doing the movie Guyver.
That's what I saw it in an article a year ago or so, and I'll be the first one in line to get it.
It's happening because Max has been sending me stuff to look at, and I'll give him little notes like, I think this is going to be should be more like this.
Very cool.
When I saw it, it looks really good. Max Factory does incredible work. So
they do.
Yeah.
Super excited about that. Yeah. Well, again, Steve, we've been talking now for over 2 hours now, I think, or close to it. So I really appreciate you being on here. Again, it means so much to the fans that you take the time to talk to us and shedding light. Again, we could really dive into every single movie and every single scene, but we just want that kind of time. But if people do want to learn more, again, Don O'Brien's book, Budget Biomorphs, The Making of the Guyver Films, of course, and also we have the 4K version of the Guyver. It's out now. I know fans are clamoring for a restoration or of Guyver 2, and we'll have to maybe in the future, I think, is kind of where we're at with that, But how can our listeners find you and all the cool things that you're still doing online? Or
I have an Instagram account called Steve Wang Creature Creator, and it mostly showcases the stuff. Like I have a studio called Onyx Forge Studio, and I do have a page as well called the Onyx Forge Official on Instagram as well. They'll show most of my professional stuff. I got a personal page, and it's got some life stuff. It's got a lot of my work stuff on there, and it's acquired taste. I tend to have an opinion about a bunch of stuff, especially about animal rights and human rights stuff. And so I do post a lot of stuff that could piss people off, but hey, take it with a grain of salt. Whatever, follow if you want. If you don't, I'm not going to break my heart. But if you want to see the work stuff, it's mostly just on the page itself. Ignore the stories.
Well, I've thoroughly enjoyed both the stories and your Instagram page, and it's been fun seeing that and seeing the work that you continue to do. And again, one last time, Steve, thank you very much, man, for taking the time to be on here. You didn't have to do this. I know you're busy, and it means the world to me, and it means the world to so many other people who are going to listen to this.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for having me. And again, appreciate everything you've done on your channel for the films, all the things you're pushing and all this information you're getting out to all the Guyver fans. I mean, I feel really bad that there hasn't been anything on the Guyver for all this time. I'm still a big fan of the Guyver. I would love to do a third one, but I think it's going to take some divine intervention for that to happen. But hey, never say never, right? If it happens again, I'm totally game, because I got a lot of ideas, and I think I'm a better filmmaker now than I was 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And also technologically, we're so much more advanced than I was back then.
Oh, absolutely.
There's so much more that can be done now than before. So
yeah.
Who knows? Maybe someday.
Well, I'll be the first one to buy a ticket again, or I'll bring you coffee on set.
Yeah, and I'm not opposed to, and just so you know, I'm not opposed to the studios coming in and getting the rights and making a Guyver movie completely with me not involved at all. Like I'm a big Guyver fan. Like I just want to see. I'm looking forward to seeing your movie. Because I'm just like I'm a Guyver fan, so it doesn't have to be me at all. I just love to watch it. So
yeah. Well, we had a good time shooting it last October, and we can talk about that.
When's it going to come out? Because I know you guys are redoing effects and stuff.
Yeah, we're adding a few more things right now. I don't want to get in trouble, but I would say probably by the end of the month.
Okay.
But again, it's a baby short film. Where we did it we just kind of like what you guys did. We just all went to LA. It started because Corey and Eric met at the 30th anniversary screening.
Yeah,
they just bumped into each other. I think Eric flew from a different state. Corey lives there, and he's a very, very accomplished DP down there. And then they reached out to me, and I said, "Hey, I want to be involved," and so I ended up assisting directing it and kind of helping them with whatever they wanted and needed. If we all flew out there, and we just had a fun time over the weekend. And as far as we know, it's the first thing that's been done since you guys did something, And again, we had a great time, and we hope fans like it. And it's just a small little baby appreciation film, so we have to talk about it.
That's great. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. So Steve and all listeners, thank you for watching. Again, Guyver Geeks, youtube.com/@theguyvergeek. If you can, please give us a subscribe or a follow, and make sure to like the video and give Steve some love in the comment section below. We have some other guests on the docket. And if you haven't, go and check out our other interviews with like David Hayter and Kathy and Bruno, Jack Armstrong.
I've seen all of them. Yeah, they're great. Yeah, they're great. I love it. And I love hearing stories from everybody, their point of view, because that's one thing I love about Dom's book is that there's so much going on behind the scene. Because my head was in a completely different place. I was making the movie. I had so much stuff that I was doing, and then everybody had so much stuff they were doing. And so it was really kind of great for me to hear of all the things that were happening around me that I had no idea about, because, obviously it takes 100 to tango in making a movie, right?
No, it's crazy.
Yeah. So I cherish all those stories and all the stuff. Like Wyatt was great, Ted, Kathy,
I love talking
David.
to Wyatt. Wyatt was such a treat. Yeah, his wife's fantastic too. Yeah, Gayla.
Yeah.
She's so nice.
It was such a treat to just hear everybody's stories that I was not aware of, and sometimes feel bad about, when they had to eat shit.
Hey, it's part of it. I tell everyone that like making a movie is like going to war, and it's you're going to get dirty, you're in the trenches, but hopefully by the end of it, you're going to come out with something pretty special. At least camaraderie. At least about anything.
Well, I think Wyatt said it best. We were young, and we were hungry, and I can attest to that. I mean, back in those days, I told my wife if she had met me back then, she would not have liked me. not because I was an asshole, but because I had this mentality of I'm a train moving in one direction, and you either get on or you get off, but I'm not stopping for anyone. That's how this film has to get made, and thank God everybody stayed on the train, because that was like we were all just moving in one direction, furiously in one direction. And that's how it got done. And, and everybody was a trooper, and I'm so appreciative of that. Like, everybody just pulled through. So it was amazing.
Well, I think it really shows through the camera, and if people haven't seen it, they need to check both these movies out. But just want to say again, thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, thank you. Take care. Thank you guys for watching.
Bye, everybody.
For more content like this, head over to youtube.com/@theguyvergeek for 4K remasters, retrospectives, behind the scenes, and more as we catalog the Guyver universe. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, and we'll see you next time.